Okay, so let's talk about what happened in late 2025. There was this law, right? A law designed to finally bring some real transparency to the Jeffrey Epstein case by releasing thousands of government files. But when the Department of Justice actually dropped the documents, it didn't create clarity. Oh no. It kicked off an absolute firestorm of controversy, with pretty much everyone from all sides screaming cover up. So let's break down exactly what happened.
And really, this whole thing, it all comes down to one big question, doesn't it? Was this a real, genuine step towards getting some accountability? Or was it just an exercise in hiding the most damning secrets in plain sight? That's what we're going to get into. So, how did we even get here? Well, it all happened so fast. You can see on this timeline. In November of 2025, you've got this bipartisan law that passes, demanding the files be released. Then on December 19th, boom, the DOJ drops a mountain of documents, but they're covered in black ink. And then, just one day later, poof, some of the most important files just vanish from the website. All right, so first, let's back up a little and talk about the law itself, because you kind of have to understand the promise here to get why everyone was so angry. And you gotta know, this wasn't some partisan squabble. Democrats and Republicans actually came together to pass this thing, the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And its mandate was crystal clear. Release all, I mean all, unclassified records. Yeah, sure, there were some narrow exceptions for things like victim privacy or national security, but the goal, the whole point, was supposed to be full disclosure. So the big day arrives, December 19th. The deadline hits, and the Department of Justice, well, they do something. But the release itself, that immediately became the real story. And, at first glance, it looked massive. Over 3,000 files hit a brand new DOJ website. You'd think, wow, okay, here we go. The floodgates are finally opening. But as always, the devil was in the details. So let's talk about what we actually saw. Because what they did release was pretty juicy, designed to grab headlines. Former President Bill Clinton was all over it on Epstein's plane with Ghislaine Maxwell. You had photos of other celebrities, too. And then there was that infamous painting of Clinton in the blue dress. Yeah, you know the one. It was all stuff guaranteed to make a huge splash. But then you start digging, and a totally different picture emerges. We're talking over 550 pages that were reportedly just gone, solid black ink. This isn't just hiding a name here or a date there. This is hiding everything. And if you want a perfect example of what I'm talking about, look at this. One of the key files released was 119 pages of grand jury testimony from New York. And every single one of those pages was just a black rectangle. The promise of transparency was met with, well, a literal wall of ink. Now, this obviously kicked off a huge debate. The DOJ's defense was, hey, the law says we can do this to protect over 1,200 victims and ongoing investigations. But critics? Oh, they were not buying it. They basically said, no way. You're using victim protection as a shield to hide the connections of powerful people and to protect the justice system itself from any real scrutiny. But believe it or not, the redactions, all that black ink, that was only the beginning of the story. What happened next is what really blew this thing wide open. It's one thing to hide something with a black marker. You can see they're hiding it. It's frustrating, sure, but it's right there in your face. It's a whole other level to publish something and then just make it disappear. Pretend it was never there. And that's exactly what critics say happened next. So, get this. The day after the big release, people notice that at least 16 files are just gone. They've been pulled from the website, and the biggest one, file 468. Why? Because it reportedly had a photo of Donald Trump with Epstein, Melania, and Ghislaine Maxwell. And it just vanished. No explanation, nothing, just silence, which of course just fueled all the speculation. The reaction to all of this, the redactions, the disappearing files, it was immediate, it was furious. And here's the crazy part. It brought Washington together in a rare moment of unity. I mean, listen to this. The law's Democratic co-sponsor, Ro Khanna, he came out swinging. He said flat out, this document dump does not comply with our law, and that the most important documents were either missing or blacked out. And just so you know, this wasn't a partisan thing. His Republican counterpart, Representative Thomas Massie, said basically the exact same thing, that the release grossly fails to comply with the spirit and letter of the law. I mean, when do you ever see that? That's how you know something's really gone wrong. But let's not forget who this was all for in the first place. What about Epstein's victims? For so many of them, this just felt like a total betrayal. They called it a slap in the face. They felt like the DOJ was failing us again. And the feeling was pretty clear. Those black boxes weren't there to protect them. They were there to protect the powerful men in Epstein's orbit. Okay, so let's step back from all the headlines and the political drama for a second. Why does this whole mess still matter? Because it really gets to the heart of some fundamental issues about justice and whether we can trust our own institutions. You've got these huge issues at stake. First, accountability. I mean, will we ever really know who was in Epstein's network of enablers if the files look like this? Second, trust in government, right? If an institution can just ignore a clear law, can you really trust it to police itself? And finally, and most importantly, justice for the victims. Did this release help them get closer to the truth, or did it just bury it even deeper? Look, the law was supposed to be a promise of transparency. But what we got instead was a whole lot more questions and a whole lot less trust. It really forces you to ask a tough question. In a case that involves this much power, this much influence, what happens when the very people in charge of giving us answers just create a bigger fog of suspicion?